Good afternoon, Sarah and Anthony. Welcome to Fun Stars and Found Stars. It is Captain's Log. What is the date today?
14th already.
4th of November, halfway through November already, 2022. People, for context for people who are listening or watching, I think there's lots of people ready to go off to Slush in Helsinki. I talked to a couple of people who were packing their bags this morning, and obviously a number of people have all got back from Web Summit, and we have the very big honour of speaking to Sarah Barber, who is from Jenson Funding Partners, who's taken time out of her busy diary on this Monday afternoon to tell us more about Jenson. And first of all, as is always the case, what we like to do is set a bit of context as to how people have got into the roles that they're doing. So Sarah, obviously we're not going back to kindergarten here or primary school, but we haven't quite got that amount of time, I suppose. Well, in my case, it'd be a long time. But we always love to hear how, especially when it's a fund, how the fund was created, how you became interested in this particular area of investment. And clearly, we met back in my Bloomberg days, which contextually was 2012 to 2017. So we've known each other and interacted with each other on and off for a good, I'd probably say 8 or 10 years. So,
yep.
So I suppose over to you, Sarah, and welcome to the show.
Well, thanks ever so much, Chris, for having me. So how did I start in this? I am an accountant by background. I trained with Deloitte many moons ago, and after sort of going through various places within Deloitte, decided that actually I wanted to branch out, and I had a great opportunity to work as an interim finance director, and started working with smaller businesses. And from that, worked with Paul Jenkinson at Jenson Solutions, which is an outsourced finance director business. And we were working with a lot of early stage businesses who just couldn't get funding. And so in 2012, when SEIS came about, we were working with Foresight. They were interested in SEIS, but it was too small for them. And we discussed with them how we could collaborate and come up with a fund. So that's what we did. So that's how the fund came about.
Just jumping in there a bit, Sarah.
Yeah.
Foresight, for people who might not know who Foresight are, I think that they're a bigger fund. Is that correct?
Yes, a much bigger fund. And yeah, they were just interested in this space. So because I think everybody can see the benefits of investing in early stage businesses, but also everybody knows that it's really hard working with early stage businesses. So it's who are you going to find to do that? But I mean, I love working with early stage businesses. So that's why we got into doing this.
Okay. And I suppose just for context, the original part of the business, which was outsourced accountancy, was that replaced, or is there still that element within the business as well?
So that still exists. It's a completely separate business, and we still work with that business for areas such as bookkeeping. I mean, Jenson Solutions is very much what I call, it's like an O2 bolt-on. It's anything that you need really, but you don't want to keep in-house. So from an FD perspective, they'll do a whole variety of things, financial modelling. So we've got a whole load of experts in there doing that. So we do use them within the fund, but it's a very separate business.
Okay, so it's not like you would cross over and upsell that service to people you've maybe done some funding with, or they may ask that question. And
if anybody's looking for a finance director, I will say we have these people. Here's their CV. Interact with them. And that, that's as far as I would go. I don't push anybody, and because from that perspective, I truly believe it's the same as any relationship, the same as us investing in anybody. That relationship is really important, so you have to find the right person for the job. So we have people that can do the job, but if it's not fit, it's not fit, and that's the same with the investing.
Okay, and I believe you are now the CEO of the
I
fund.
am.
Correct.
I am.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Congratulations. When did that happen, Sarah? Was that recently?
So that was quite early on.
Okay.
So what was that? 2014, 2015.
Okay.
Yeah, it was about 2014 because that's when we decided we were going to do the EIS fund. So I sort of got in and sort of set that up as a follow-on strategy.
Right. And in terms of the actual business itself, is Paul still involved? It's a team of 6, 8, 10, more. And
so we have a team of there's 7 of us within the team who are actively running the business. We have 5 sort of partners who sit on the board. Paul is one of those partners, so still has an involvement, but very much from the day-to-day running of the business. There's myself, Jeffrey Forstin, who is the Chief Investment Officer, so he runs with all the deal flow, and sort of looking after the portfolio companies and the strategic side of that. And then we have we've got a great team sitting there looking after investor relations and all the normal things.
And if I was a founder and I was thinking, okay, and you know, we know how some founders work. When they just want to start fundraising, they kind of do their whole Crunchbase download and they get 1,000 investors and they're kind of like, oh my God, how do I start? Who do I contact? So if they were to sort of listen to this podcast and or podcast and find out more about Jenson Funding Partners, they would knock on your door because you're SEIS and EIS, and is within that is there a mantra of a particular industry type? Because I also know that you're extremely active. I think I read somewhere that you're one of the most active.
Over 125 companies with 28 follow-on funding rounds.
Well, thank you, Anthony. But I think you're one of the UK's most active investors at this stage, I believe.
So we've invested, as Anthony quite rightly pointed out, in over 125 businesses. We try and invest in SEIS somewhere between 10 and 15 companies a year. And we try and keep it at that sort of level so that we can actually work with those businesses, because we don't just invest, we actually sort of have an involvement with those businesses afterwards. We're quite busy, we're quite active, very active.
Good imagine.
Is there a kind of a vertical split? Are you focused on SaaS, AI, clean tech, climate tech? Obviously, there's a lot of focus in the current market in 2022 in sustainability and ESG. Could you give us a bit of flavour there, Sarah, on maybe some recent investments and where they may have been in?
Yeah, so we're as an early stage investor. I think our purpose is predominantly to invest in a cross section of companies. The people that come to us, they've got the expertise, that they know the sector, and obviously we do our due diligence to make sure they know that. What they're possibly lacking is the understanding of the funding cycle. So how to start as an early stage, how to grow your business, what you need to be doing, what you need to be thinking about. So that's very much what we believe that we offer into that. So there's no sector specifics that we go into. We do like to invest in tech-enabled businesses, and by that I mean tech has to form part of the growth of the business. So, you know, that's very much sort of fundamental to the growing of the business. But yeah, there is no specific sector in that. In terms of sustainability, we're seeing a lot more of that. There's definitely a trend for businesses coming to us that have that kind of leaning. But the sort of the way we look at businesses hasn't changed at all. We very much make sure that we're looking at businesses that can really define what the problem is, really define what the solution is to that problem, and really define the market that applies to. So they're the sort of key things that we'll be looking for when sort of looking for founders and new businesses.
Okay, and the most recent investment, what was that into, Sarah?
So yeah, we're currently deploying our SEIS tranche. So we did our first close in July. So we've done 2 companies into that tranche, and I wouldn't like to choose out of either of them. So the 2 were Skooma Water, which offers a water filter essentially that generates minimal waste while providing its consumers with electrolyte enhanced water based on their personal needs. So unlike I don't know, a water filter you've got, it might leave microplastics in there, but it will also take out the nutrients, whereas this one will leave sort of the nutrients but take out all the bad bits. And then the other one was Violet Ultra, and they've got a smart switch which essentially provides quick and easy control of all your smart home systems. So we're getting into this era of having lots of different sort of smart devices around. So this just all puts it in a nice place.
IoT in reality. Yeah. So and like those 2 examples just spring out to me. Not afraid of I suppose a hardware investment, and not afraid of probably a B2C investment. Is that right?
Both big funding gaps in the UK. So
yeah. We're not afraid of investing in a diverse portfolio, and I think that's what we're trying to offer, is not just investing into the same thing. I think, as I've sort of said, the early stage business is, if you pinpoint sort of too early, you can really sort of pigeonhole yourself into sort of trying to run those businesses, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're very much trying to give these businesses the leg up to the next stages, and so yeah, we're not worried about hardware, but we wouldn't invest 10 to 15 companies in hardware. No. We'd make sure it's very, very diversified.
Yeah, and I suppose, though, in the case of those 2 businesses, there's tech being built, they're tech enabled, there's possibly product market fit, there's maybe early revenues, customers, good pipeline. Obviously UK only investments,
UK focus at the moment, but yeah, very much a view to going international with it as well.
Okay. It's interesting.
And
what, just EU or global?
Well, I mean, let's see how they get on, but I mean, let's start off in the EU. EU and US tend to be the sort of sweet spots for internationalizing at the moment, but for both of those companies, I think there's B2C element, but there's B2B2C in it as well. So great businesses, and the people who are running them, I think I probably need to really enforce that. The teams that are running these are super smart, know their stuff, and you know they're great sort of teams that we've invested in as well.
So if I look at the process of those businesses getting investment, they have
You need to come and talk to our founders. That's exactly it.
We've been doing this a long time, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, we can move fairly quickly. We've got a very standard set of documents. So when we see people, we do like to see them, 3 or 4 times. Absolutely. We've had some companies we've worked with for 18 months, making sure that what we're investing in is the right thing. So, and we've had people come to us and we've said, well, no, that doesn't quite fit with the market. They'll go away. That doesn't quite fit because you haven't got the right people on board. They'll go away and they'll come back to us with those people. So it's not, sometimes it can be 18 months, sometimes it can be 6 weeks. But yeah, we like to spend time with all of them. As I said, this is a relationship. We're going to be with these people for a long time. So
yeah, I was going to expand on the mention of you're quite hands-on. How's that pan out then? Is that, you're a member of a person's on the board, or are you, do you have quarterly meetings with them? What's that in practice, Sarah?
Yeah, so it's a number of things. We do have board rights, but we like to take a proactive approach rather than a controlling approach. So we tend to just be a board observer. A lot of the companies that come on board, they're not even at that stage of having sort of really formal board meetings. So we will just set up monthly calls with them, and we'll work through with them how to get to the stage of getting to a board, because that's crucial as they're growing. So that's one of the things we'll do with them. So there'll be monthly calls. We also do things like founder forums. So on a monthly or every couple of months, we'll have a founder forum that might talk about value proposition. It might talk about exits. It might talk about alternative sources of financing, venture debt, what your board structure should look like. So, a real wide variety of things. And that does 2 things. It, number one, encourages people to come and listen to those subjects because they're quite important to them at this stage. But it also gives everybody a chance to actually meet each other as founders and portfolio companies. So and we encourage people to talk to each other. We've got a WhatsApp group. We've got that is managed by our team, but it's very much for the portfolio companies to talk to each other. Find out where they can go and hire somebody, or find just those little things that you wake up and think, I just don't know the answers to that. They can come to us and we can give them what we know. But if they go to the rest of the portfolio, they've got sort of 30 odd people that will also be able to answer them. So it's a really good way of the portfolio companies working together to do that. We do monthly bulletin, we've got discounts. So lots and lots of different things, but it's very much a proactive approach rather than we're trying to tell you what to do approach.
Yeah. You go, Anthony.
No, I mean, just kind of on that topic, I'm sure there must be people wondering, the scale of what you guys are working on. How are you guys managing that? Because 120 portfolio companies that are all having monthly calls and then investing into 12 or 13 new companies a year, right? You guys must have some masterful techniques to be able to manage all of this workload.
I would actually quickly add to that as well. I'm quite interested because there's a bit of a trend at the moment with some of the VCs that we talk to regularly through the nature of the advisory work or events that I run. And there seems to be like it's all on January, because at the moment a lot of VCs are well, from what I'm hearing from different people, and this might not or might be the case for Jenson, but they're very hyper focused on portfolio managing their existing portfolio at the moment. And January, the magical January, they keep saying, new year, new start, will be when they not just deploying because it's a new year, but they have to deploy because they've got maybe the SEIS running into April, and it's like, spring madness. And so if you could add a bit of context there as well, Sarah, that'd be good.
Yes. So there's two questions there. So let's make sure that I remember them.
So the first one is managing scale, right?
Managing scale.
What are the tips?
So in terms of that, so as much as we've invested in 125, I think it's a couple more than that now, but we've invested in that number of businesses. Some have already gone. So I would say we've probably got, and we've also exited some of those companies. So I would say we've probably got between 60 and 70 active companies at the moment. We split up the calls with those companies, and they're half-hour calls. We have a very sort of
is it a strict half hour as well?
No. I mean, it's strict half hour if I've got somebody afterwards. But if somebody needs to speak for a little bit longer, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, so we'll sit down and work with them. But the way that we really manage all of this is because we've got a great team that works with us. So if anything comes out of that, that we feel that we need to do something about, then we've got a great team behind us that will help us sort of find whatever we need to do. So yeah, that's really how we manage it. It works. And I mean, the other thing I would say is, not all of them are going to succeed, and that's just a fact. But what having these calls every month actually means is that where something doesn't quite go right, we can manage that process as well, because actually working with the people when things aren't going so right is just as important. Because it's not necessarily anything that they've done that has happened that's making this happen. It could be market forces. It could be, something's just, the economics just aren't working. So at that point, you've got to make sure that you're getting out sooner rather than later. So, it's very important to make sure we're sort of spending time on that as well. And it's also being incredibly clear, I think, about what we can help with and what we can't help with. And the things that we can't help with, making sure that we're pointing in the right direction for the things that we can't help with. So, it's a signposting. It's that does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then I suppose, the other one was at the moment, I've seen this Q4 trend of having to portfolio manage more and perhaps invest more in the new year.
Yeah, I mean, we have an approach where, so with the SEIS fund, that process is happening throughout the year in terms of deployment. So that's going on all the time. EIS does tend to be more tax year end driven, but because we know those companies as well, they still go through an investment committee process, and so we have a separate investment committee that they go through. It's a very structured process that they go through. We're still working with those businesses on the sort of portfolio management side. There's probably co-investment coming alongside as well. So it's all just part and parcel of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis throughout the rest of the year. Yes, it will be a lot busier. We try and avoid holidays at that time of year. It's those kind of things that we need to do to manage it. But yeah, we just know it's busier. We try and avoid holidays, and we get on with it. And there'll be other things that might slip in terms of perhaps we need to put our marketing off until April so that we, so it's just balancing everything.
Yeah. And I'd probably ask, of the businesses you invest in at SEIS stage, is it 50%, 60%, 70% then get EIS investment, or is it a lot lower?
No, so we're probably talking about 30%, 35%.
Yeah.
We'll
That's
get the
still
following
high.
funding. But it's but again, we have criteria for making sure, because these are different investors, so we have to make sure that when we're investing, it's all investing in accordance with our IM, in accordance with all the rules. So so we're not just chucking money in afterwards. It's there has to be a good growth story for it. It's So
can I just ask, what's the best exit you've had?
Yeah, we've had quite a good exit quite recently. So
you're smiling there, Sarah.
Yeah, well, we're not allowed to tell anybody what the exit is. It's the most frustrating thing in the world.
Mum's the word.
We exited One Touch, and it was bought out by August Equity, a private equity house. So, we can say that, but in terms of what the multiples are, but it's a private equity house, so.
Okay, it'll be good then. Well done, congratulations. And then I suppose, one of the things we always try and touch on a bit, Sarah, on these podcasts is, what you classify some of the trends in the industry. So, naturally you're UK focused. Has the traditional bent been towards investing in London-based and Southeast-based companies, or have you always been quite, regionally diverse? Because obviously we know there's huge growth in the north and the southwest, and all over actually the UK, with great founders. Where are you on that?
So at last count, 60% of our companies were invested outside of London. So as much as we have a London office, we've always been sort of quite virtually based. We've got base in London. It makes it a lot easier, but it also makes it quite easy when we go elsewhere. We've held review panels. So as part of our process, we have a review panel. We've held those outside of London on many occasions. So, so we, if we get a group of companies in a different region, we'll happily go out there. That's not a problem. So yeah, 60% are outside, but there is more opportunity, I would say, for investing outside of London now. You're seeing more accelerators, you're seeing more hubs in sort of cities outside of London. So what we do is we just try and keep in contact with as many of those hubs outside of London to make sure that people know that we're open for investment, because I don't think it's the fact that people that VCs only want to invest where they're based, especially in this day and age. It's just more getting access to those. So it's very much down to trying to get involved as much as possible with the sort of regions. And I think
any particular region that has stuck out for you? Is it the north? Is it southwest? Is it Bristol? Is it
in terms of what we've invested in? No, I mean Ireland. So at that recent exit, that was an Irish, that was over in Ireland. We've got companies in Scotland, Bristol, Manchester. I mean, all over.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very, very, very broad.
I suppose the other sort of trend. Well, really, I'm just interested in your opinion on this. Everyone talks about it. I go back to the days of Bloomberg philanthropy, where I'd worked with with the team there, and they kind of have an event on, and it was a women in tech event, and they're like, oh, we've got the auditorium booked, Chris, it's next week, and we've only got like 3 women, can you help? And then all of a sudden I bring in 35 women, because I'm just by virtue of the work I've done. I've always had a good like female following and group. And I suppose just over those years since you've been at Jenson, have you seen more female founders, more female VCs? Are you finding you're interacting more with other women in the industry, or not?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more women in the industry, and I think it's for me, it's a really attractive industry to be in. It's a great opportunity to make changes. I always think it's to find businesses, to invest in businesses, grow those businesses, and what those businesses are. It's a huge opportunity for change, and I think we've always been quite fortunate with the sort of makeup of the team, that we've always looked like a different team. So we've always been approached, I think, by a slightly different founder, which is great. And very naively, I think either Jeffrey or I really actually realised it until it became a thing, and we actually started looking at the numbers, and the numbers of people that were coming to see us, and the numbers of people that we'd invested in. And when we had an intern in, I think it was last year or the year before, and she was absolutely devastated. She came to us and she said, "I'm so sorry, you've only invested in the last 3 years in 18% female founders." And I was like, okay. And I said, "How many came to us?" And she said, "Well, 18%. And I was like, "Well, that's proportionate, so that's great. But do you know how many women founders actually get invested in by VCs?" And she was like, "No." I said, "Well, it's between 1% and 2%. And she was like, "Oh, okay."
That's quite good then.
yeah, absolutely. And we haven't been going out targeting. We haven't made a huge effort. We hadn't sort of thought, right, this is our mandate. We're going to be a sort of female. This is just what happened, and it was because of, I think, what the team looks like.
That's good. And I suppose that on that note, the diversity angle as well, is that looked at within the business?
Yeah, very much so. So we became B Corp certified in August. So for us, because of all of this work that we did, it's become something that we do look at, and we do analyze and record. We get the data for it, etc. I've never been a huge fan of setting massive targets or anything else, because I still believe that we need to invest in good businesses. But what we do is we do try and go out and find different areas to that big pool of founders, and that's what we're looking for, is that big pool of founders and companies that we can invest in. And we like to think about it as more inclusive investing, rather than actually sort of going out and doing sort of female founders or anything else. So and I mean, the reality of it is that there's underserved populations in London. So we're talking about investing outside of London. Actually, there's huge underserved populations in London that also need to be looked at, so that it doesn't stop. We don't need to just jump outside London.
Sarah, can you perhaps divulge who those people potentially, or those groups of people that you were thinking about that are underrepresented in London?
Yeah, so we have been working with the British Business Bank, on this particular aspect, and it's looking at what they would call underrepresented universities. So we, at the start of the year, went down to Kingston University, and there was a group of universities that they collaborated with, and we sat and talked to their business groups about what VC investing is all about, why they shouldn't be worried about coming and talking to us. We did a session afterwards with some of the alumni from those universities, and we've got another event happening tomorrow along the same vein. So it's about sort of going out to different areas, different universities, different alumni. And
you mentioned Kingston, which is really interesting, very close to where I live, which is great. I've always worked very closely with Queen Mary University in Whitechapel. Great. If you do great, fantastic courses there, great AI, lots of deep tech. Also, Southampton is a fantastic university as well. I don't know if you've done stuff with Future Worlds and Ben at Future Worlds. That's a good one.
We haven't, no. So it's been very much the London-based one at the moment, because what they wanted to do was see how that went, and then we'd roll it out to different British Business Bank. The British Business Bank, we're very much wanting to see how this event went, and for a couple of times, and then we were going to try and roll it out to different regions.
So if you do a candid camera on this, it's an event at a university, Kingston, with the British Business Bank, and it's like a seminar, a forum with founders in that area, with students, or
with students, with people. So it's other universities. So I think the one that we did in February, I think it was, there was Roehampton University, and the Chamber of Commerce also had people coming in. So anybody in those areas that probably didn't really know about what VC investment is,
got you.
would come in and get some kind of understanding as to what that is. Because, and which I think is important, a lot of people don't realise that VC funding can be early stage. And so there's this perception of it always has to be very, very, very late stage.
Propagated by my old employer Bloomberg and various other news channels, that it's all about like mega stakes in mega companies that are about to IPO, or used to be about to IPO. But I get it. I mean, it's still a mystery for a lot of people, and I think doing what you're doing there is really a really good thing, Sarah, because we, like I said, going back to my point at the start of the call about people who are starting out, the founder, maybe setting up their first business, they do the Crunchbase download and they get 1,000 kind of like VCs. They've got no idea who to turn to, what they do, whether they're early stage, late stage, medium stage. It's a real myriad and a mystery, isn't it, really? Perhaps, promoted to be like that by some people in the industry. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's another, it comes down to education again, doesn't it? It's when we started SEIS 10 years ago, you didn't have many people doing early stage investing. And through SEIS, which I think was a great thing to bring in, obviously. And then, you've got crowdfunding that's really sort of taken off as well. And people are starting to understand a little bit about what early stage investing is, and understanding, what type of businesses they're investing in, the stage of those businesses. Because in my head, when we talk about sectors, I see early stage investing very much as its own kind of unique sector, if you like, that you're investing in. It's not about the businesses, that's a sector in itself, rather than and obviously it's a stage, but you have to be, I think, quite specialist in how you deal with those businesses to take them forward.
I'm wondering actually on this topic, are the universities or are the business schools, when when I did economics and all those years ago and, A level and, is VC on the agenda now? Is there a chapter when you do your equivalent of A level now, or you do a business studies degree? Do you study this element? I
Probably do, but probably
Stanford,
not at an
Stanford
early
University has very good venture capital.
there, yes, but they've always been very good. I'm talking about whether it's, Kingston, which is perhaps not as well known as Stanford for producing, superstar founders. But is that on the mandate here for what you're trying to achieve, Sarah?
Very possibly not. I mean, I've not really gone into that deeper level, but I do. I mean, it's one of those things when we talk about this and understanding early stage investing, but also understanding inclusive investing, and when the education has to start when you're doing careers counselling at school to understand I mean, why not? You kind of really, it needs to be like everything, out there and available to everybody to understand and see what it is.
Well, kind of on that vein, I wanted to something that's come across to me throughout the podcast is this element of diversification, right? And from my perspective, it seems like you guys are probably the most diversified early stage investor out there. Sector, industry, location, demographics, even the stage of the companies, because you reinvest as well. Was that always part of the strategy? And if it wasn't, when did it kind of emerge as a theme for you guys?
I think yes. It wasn't part of the strategy, and I would say it's probably not core to the strategy now. I would say that's who we at Jenson are. So if you were talking about strategies, the primary strategy is going out, investing in early stage businesses, sector agnostic, and having a set of criteria with that. The secondary sort of thesis of it is who Jenson is, and our underlying ethos for investing. And that's why we became a B Corp at the end of the day, is because we wanted to demonstrate that we as a firm, as an employer, as a set of people, these are the things that we believe in, so that then sort of overlays into that investment strategy. But I wouldn't say it's our core to our investment strategy. Does that make sense?
It's quite interesting because obviously early stage investing is risky and diversification is the only free lunch you get in investing, right? So it's quite interesting that the diversification is so widespread across the portfolio. I mean, you must have seen that sort of pay off during COVID as well, where some of the businesses would have, through that diversification, would have been, seeing a huge COVID bump, right, and that sort of thing as well.
What do you mean a huge?
So COVID bump as in they sort of accelerated their growth through COVID.
They were right for the environment during COVID.
Yeah.
In terms of, it's not something. I mean, to be fair, through COVID, we were very much working with our portfolio businesses at that point. That was really our key focus at that point. There was a lot of uncertainty. Nobody knew what was going on. So our key focus was working with those portfolio companies, making sure they knew where they could get help, making sure that they were fine. From a mental health perspective, it was really, really tough for a lot of people. So, there were a lot of businesses that thrived through that, and a lot of businesses that either had to hibernate. We didn't see a huge amount that failed. In actual fact, I'm trying to think of one that did, because I'm sure there must have been, that was a cause of COVID.
That's kind of what I mean, having such a diverse portfolio, because one of the things that we've seen is that VC is getting more and more specialized rather than generalists, but then you kind of lose out on that diversification, which lowers your overall risk.
Hedge yourself, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Diversification. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a-
absolutely.
That's good.
But again, I bring that back to it being an early stage environment, because I think early stage businesses have got they can be more agile in that kind of environment as well.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Okay.
that in itself makes it slightly different to a later stage and a sector focus and a
Yeah, exactly.
I suppose, like, now looking at more the here and now, and we did touch on this a bit at the start of the podcast, you know, the trend being the friend, I suppose, is green tech, climate tech, you know, obviously something that COVID and subsequently, you know, the problems we've had this year with the war and fuel and all of the dependency on fossil fuels being massively exposed. Are you specifically, as we move into 23, looking at more investments in that space?
Yes. So we are. We've number one, we've seen a lot more companies coming to us in that sustainable space, and I think with the sort of mandate that exists for that, we'll be launching a fund specifically focused on that area.
Net zero or net zero focus, is it? Or not?
It will be a transition to net zero and enabling that transition. So it's, and again, what we're focusing on, again, is the very, very early stage, innovative growth companies that sit within that sector. So it's very much working on looking at companies, because we're seeing a lot of companies coming through in that area that don't necessarily meet our criteria for SEIS.
Yeah.
For various reasons. It could be
some of them are big projects, aren't they, that are kind of like, if they succeed, they will be fantastic and could really have an impact, a massive impact on whichever particular segment of the industry. But to get to succeed, it's going to need a 2, 3, or maybe even a 5-year runway to get to the point of having that impact, which obviously doesn't play into that SEIS type scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but we're just seeing so many of them that it's a real huge opportunity to get those companies off the ground. And again, at the early stages, that's who we are, is early stage growth, innovative companies. And so, we thought we're seeing so many of them. If we need to do something about this. So yes,
that's good news.
Well, let's hope so. Watch this space. Watch this space. I mean, we're really excited about it. We've got some great advisors on board, and we think that between the advisors and the experience that we've got in the early stage investment cycle, we think this will be a good thing.
And I agree with you. I think it's definitely an area that I'm wrong when I'm saying the trend is the friend. It is clearly, there are some fantastic technologies, businesses, founders, opportunities in this segment that, again, that's the opportunity. There is a dearth of, in my mind, specialized funds, right, for the early stage founder that is in net zero or moving to net zero, or however you classify it. And there's a great match there. Yeah,
I mean, I think a lot of the companies that you will see get invested at a later stage, they'll have had friends and family networks. They'll understand where to go to get the funding in the first place. Whereas I think if we can get in there, I think you'll see better companies coming through, and that's what we believe. So yeah.
It's great that you're doing so well. I've really enjoyed catching up and having this opportunity to talk more. One thing we always do is just sort of ask our guests outside of Jenson. Any hobbies, any particular interests that people wouldn't imagine that you do? Do you go horse riding?
Do you have any free time?
Yeah. You do any, what's on the agenda?
So what do I do in my spare time? Play the clarinet. A lot of people don't know that.
Our previous guest is trombone enthusiast, trombonist. So.
Yes, we had someone who was a trombonist recently. So clarinet. Wow.
Clarinet, yeah. It was something that I did when I was at school, and I left it for about, I don't know, 20 odd years. And then I found my old clarinet. And it's one of those things that it's, I suppose, a bit of mindfulness, isn't it? It takes you off somewhere completely different.
Yeah, what we need to do occasionally. Yeah, great. All right, lovely. Well, look, thanks. Anthony, any more questions from you before we go?
No. I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, no, it's been really good.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I have. Good to see you.